You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Germany shaped the course of modern life in ways that ripple far beyond its borders. Long before the world knew Germany as a unified country, the region that would become Germany was already a forge for some of the deepest questions that still echo in how we see ourselves today. Some of the most influential thinkers walked those forests and towns, people who dug into the tension between reason and feeling, science and myth, the self and the world. People like Immanuel Kant, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Friedrich Nietzsche, Karl Marx, Arthur Schopenhauer, and Martin Heidegger. The ideas that came out of these minds are still embedded in how we talk about freedom, identity, rebellion, the state, and the wild contradictions of human life. Much of what we call the modern age, the obsession with the individual self, the worry over factories and machines, the push for national pride and identity, even the romantic belief in resisting the ordinary, sprouted in a region that had no single flag, no single king, and no clear borders for most of its early history. What we think of as Germany was, for centuries, just a patchwork of small kingdoms, states and principalities that fought, argued, and borrowed ideas from each other, and from neighbors like France and Britain. In that messy patchwork, the modern world found a place to brew, and the place where it really began to bubble over was during the period we call the Enlightenment. While France and Britain rose as giants of reason and empire, Germany sat uneasy and restless. The French Enlightenment glowed bright with talk of reason and universal rights. The British found their fuel in science and empire building, but the scattered German lands carried an unease, a sense that these grand theories left out something close to the bone. The French philosophers seemed cold and distant with their elegant systems. The British empiricists catalogued the world but sometimes overlooked its living pulse. German thinkers looked at this and felt a gap, a hollow space where real life, the messy, contradictory, emotional parts of being human should live. So what did they do with this gap? They turned inward. They turned to the land under their feet. They turned to the words on their tongues. They turned to the old forest paths and the dark tales whispered by firelight. They turned to the stories of witches and wolves, of lost children and magic spells that drifted through the trees. They dug into the language that everyday people spoke, the rough, earthy German that Martin Luther once dared to use when he translated the sacred texts out of Latin. This act alone cracked open a door. It let ordinary people hear sacred words in their own homes, with their own ears, in words that felt like the soil underfoot and the fire on the hearth. That love for everyday words grew. It made Germany a nation of readers and dreamers, with no mighty navy, no distant colonies, no grand newspapers binding it all together. The people in these small towns and winding valleys found escape in pages. They built castles in their heads long before they built them in stone. They wandered through imaginary woods long before trains stitched the real forests together. Writers like Johann Wolfgang von Goethe gave them worlds to slip into, dreams that stretched from village lanes all the way to the bright citrus groves of the distant Mediterranean. And when we talk about German ideas, we talk about the forest too. The German forest was not just trees. It was a realm of contradictions, life and decay, beauty and danger, light flickering through shadow. Soldiers hid in its depths, children vanished along its crooked trails. Poets found their muses in its hush and hush. Painters like Caspar David Friedrich painted lone trees that stand like sentinels of a people's memory. Roots tangled deep in the soil, branches reaching for sky, quiet yet full of storm. This forested spirit seeped into stories collected by the brothers who gave us the fairy tales so many of us still know by heart today. Those brothers did not invent these stories. They went out into villages and listened. They gathered old tales spoken by grandmothers, woodcutters, and children, tales born in the shadows of these same woods. These threads, language, landscape, stories, wove together into something new. They fed a growing hunger for ideas that felt alive, not carved in cold marble. When Martin Luther put holy words into the everyday tongue, he did more than challenge an empire of priests. He handed people the power to read, to imagine, to argue, and to dream. Books spread like wildfire in these lands where printing presses clattered and thinkers hunched by candlelight. The hunger for books turned small rooms into portals. One could sit in a cottage by a forest and read about deserts, palaces, ancient cities, and radical visions for what life could be. All of this prepared the ground for a bigger reaction, for while France crowned itself king of the Enlightenment and Britain busied itself measuring stars and building ships, Germany bristled under foreign boots. Napoleon's armies marched across these patchwork lands and stitched them together under the weight of conquest. Young radicals who once cheered the cry for liberty and brotherhood found themselves forced to carry French banners into the snows of Russia. The betrayal stung. The same thinkers who raised a glass to freedom turned bitter when that freedom arrived as an emperor's sword. This resentment did not fade. It grew teeth and wings. It fed the spirit of thinkers who wanted to break from what they saw as the icy grip of French logic and British practicality. They did not reject reason outright. They did not fling away the spark that thinkers like Immanuel Kant struck when he wrote about how our minds shape the world. But they added to it. They said reason alone was a cage if it did not sing with the heartbeat of life. They looked for that heartbeat in folk songs, in ghost stories, in the ways ordinary people spoke and dreamed. They turned to the landscape, to the forests and hills, to the secret places where old beliefs survived the clash of empires. And then came the Romantics, young and hungry for something bigger than cold facts. They found a new gospel in adventure, in the thrill of a road untraveled, in the shock of beauty that strikes when you stand alone under a stormy sky. One young man packed his bags and set out to see the world with fresh eyes. He did not want the world pinned to pages. He wanted to walk its paths, to taste its dust, to hear its voices. He dreamed of a new way of thinking about history, not as a chain of kings and battles, but as a dance of cultures, each shaped by its land, its songs, its fears, and its hopes. When Johann Gottfried Herder stepped out into that wide world, he planted seeds that would grow into modern anthropology. He wanted to gather stories, to hear how people far from his cold forests explained who they were and where they came from. He saw poetry in these old songs. He saw clues in myths that told how a people saw themselves and the earth beneath them. To him, the pulse of a nation was not just in its armies or its borders, but in the words passed down from grandmothers to grandchildren by firelight. When he wrote about these things, he was planting ideas that others would pick up. Some would twist them into calls for flags and borders. Some would see in them a warning about how easy it is to turn pride in one's roots into fences that shut out the rest of the world. But at their core, these ideas were about finding the hidden heartbeat of a people, the stories they tell, the songs they hum, the forests they walk. As these ideas spread, a new shape formed in the German imagination, a shape that did not belong only to professors or poets, but to any person who sat by the fire and wondered why life felt so tangled. In small towns and dark forests, people carried these questions in their heads. They wondered what it meant to be part of something bigger, yet still feel alone inside their own minds. They felt the pull between the tidy plans of reason and the wild call of dreams that slip through cracks no logic can seal. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant planted the thought that we do not just receive the world as it is, but shape it with the frames in our minds. But his followers did not stop there. Johann Gottlieb Fichte picked up Kant's candle and held it higher. He said the world outside is not enough, that inside each person burns a force more powerful than any rule book. This force, this I, does not just see the world, but builds it, molds it, colors it with feeling and intention. To Fichte, every person could be a builder of meaning, not just a quiet observer. He saw in this a spark that could light the fires of freedom and action. This idea that each person holds an entire world inside was like lightning striking dry ground. It fed the roots of what we now call Romanticism. In those short decades at the end of the 18th century and the start of the 19th, the German lands hummed with this energy. People who wrote poems by candlelight, people who painted dark forests and lone figures, people who composed music that swelled and thundered like storms. They were all part of this restless tide, and they were not satisfied with neat rows of numbers or tidy systems of thought. They wanted more. They wanted the infinite. They wanted to stand in the woods and feel their hearts pound with something they could never fully name. They wanted to believe that behind every tree, every shadow, every sigh of wind, there was something deeper, a truth too wild for words alone. This hunger for the infinite did not mean they abandoned reason altogether. It meant they refused to let reason shut the door on mystery. They did not want to tear down the bridges built by science and logic. They wanted to build new bridges into places reason alone could not reach. They felt that imagination was not a distraction, but a tool, a bright lantern to shine into corners that facts alone left dark. Friedrich Schlegel, a poet and thinker among these restless minds, believed that people are doomed to chase the absolute, that perfect truth or happiness we can almost see but never quite hold. For him, this was not a curse, but part of what makes us human. We reach and stumble, we dream and fail, but in the reaching we grow, in the falling we learn. This constant dance between what is and what might be, between the limits of our bodies and the endless rooms of our thoughts, this is what he called romantic. To make the ordinary feel infinite, to lift a common moment into something that glows with mystery, this was the trick. When the German poet Novalis wrote about giving the everyday a secret depth, he showed that the mundane can carry a spark of the eternal, a forest path, a whispered story, a single candle in a window. All of it could hold a door to something bigger than the sum of its branches or pages or flickering flame. So many of these ideas seem simple now, but in their time, they cracked open what it meant to be human. They helped shape how we think of our inner lives today. When you pick up a novel and disappear into someone else's thoughts, you echo this old belief that the self is a universe. When you stand in a gallery and feel tears rise at a painting of a lone figure under dark trees, you stand with those first romantics who saw forests not as timber but as cathedrals for the soul. Yet not everything born in that forest of ideas stayed gentle. Some branches twisted into shadows. National pride, once a way to say this land, these words, these songs matter, could become a banner for division and conquest. The same myths that helped people feel rooted could be turned to build walls and sharpen swords. The same longing for a lost, pure identity could feed dark dreams of blood and soil. This is part of what makes the German story so complicated. The same thinkers who taught the world to treasure the self, to chase the infinite, to hold imagination as sacred, their words and symbols were later picked up and twisted by others who wanted power more than truth. The roots of Romanticism stretch into the soil that also gave rise to brutal myths of race and nationhood that scarred the 20th century. But in the forest of ideas, not every path runs to darkness. Many of those early dreamers would have wept to see how their visions were used. They believed in contradiction, in struggle, in the tension between light and shadow. They knew that life is not one clear road but a maze where wonder and danger twist together. They taught that holding on to the infinite means never pretending that we have all the answers. It means standing in the woods, feeling the chill and the hush, and knowing some secrets should stay just out of reach. These thinkers gave us more than warnings. They gave us ways to hold our own contradictions. They whispered that it is possible to stand with one foot in the everyday world of work and bills and buses, and the other foot in a place where imagination soars like a hawk over dark trees. They showed that being human means never being just one thing. We are reason and dream, flesh and idea, rooted in towns and forests, yet forever wandering in our minds. Even now, you can see their fingerprints everywhere. in the music that swells in movies when a hero stands alone under a stormy sky, in the novels that tell stories not of kings, but of shopkeepers, lovers, lost souls, in the slow scenes of films where the camera lingers on trees, rivers, faces deep in thought, moments that ask us to pause, to feel, to wonder. This is how Germany's tangled story of ideas lives on, not just in books, not just in philosophy classrooms, but in the pulse of daily life. It lives in the way we see ourselves as centers of our own worlds, free to question, to rebel, to dream of something more. It lives in the forests we walk, the pages we turn, the quiet moments when we feel there must be more than what we can see. When we stand back and look at the shape of this story, we see how Germany's restless mind has never really stopped roaming. After the Romantics, other thinkers picked up the trail. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel took the swirling contradictions and gave them a new frame. For him, history itself was alive, pushing forward through conflict and clash, bending toward freedom through a dance of ideas, meeting their opposites and birthing something new. His vision was sweeping and abstract, but at its heart was the same restlessness, the belief that truth is not frozen, but always becoming. Then came Friedrich Nietzsche, who smashed through old certainties with a hammer of words. He looked at the neat worlds built by his philosophical ancestors and asked what lurked in their shadows. He asked what happens when faith shatters, when the stories that held people together fall silent. He did not turn away from the chaos that comes after. He leaned into it, saying that people must shape their own meaning in the yawning gap left behind. He called for a spirit strong enough to dance with contradiction, to embrace life's storms without flinching. Later, Martin Heidegger sat alone in his hut in the Black Forest and asked what it means simply to be, to exist in time, rooted in a place, breathing the cold mountain air. He turned back to old questions, speaking of forests and clearing, of things that appear and vanish like mist at dawn. His words, too, fed debates that would spread far beyond the narrow paths of German woods. From all of this, the Enlightenment's cold spark, the Romantics' wild flame, the tangled visions of the 19th and 20th centuries, we inherit something strange and vital. We inherit a way of holding tension without snapping it in half. We inherit the habit of turning inward and outward at once, of finding worlds in ourselves and still being startled by the quiet drama of a single tree or an old story told around a fire. This same spirit-shaped music that could shatter silence with a single note. Ludwig van Beethoven's symphonies, heavy with emotion, taught audiences that sound itself could be a storm. It shaped poetry that wrapped the ordinary in secret meanings. It shaped novels that turned the inner life of simple people into whole landscapes of longing and doubt. It shaped a hunger for stories that circle the ordinary lives of people working, loving, losing, and hoping in small towns and crowded cities. Today, this legacy lives on, even if many who carry it do not know its name. It hums through the background when a new novel dares to linger in a moment that feels too small but turns out to be enormous when felt fully. It whispers when we walk a forest trail and feel a chill that has nothing to do with weather. That soft sense that we are brushing against something old, something bigger than our small selves. It echoes when we wonder why a simple melody can move us to tears, or why we keep turning pages deep into the night, hungry to feel someone else's thoughts inside our own head. But this inheritance also asks something of us. It asks us not to rush past the contradictions, not to silence the mess with neat systems or final answers. It asks us to let our imagination stretch its wings now and then, to believe there are mysteries worth keeping. It reminds us that while reason is a powerful tool, it is not the only one we hold. We are creatures of logic and creatures of dream. We are builders of cities and wanderers of forests. We carry maps and we carry myths. This is why that small patchwork of old German states matters, why it still speaks in the hum of engines, in the flicker of screens, in the quiet hush before an orchestra plays its first note, because from it we learn that ideas grow best in the cracks between certainty and doubt, that the I, the self that feels like a whole universe, is built not just by facts, but by stories, songs, places, and the secret conversation we carry with ourselves when we walk alone under tall trees. Germany's gift, tangled and sometimes dangerous, sometimes beautiful, was to remind us that the modern self is both anchor and sail. It roots us in the here and now, yet pushes us to drift toward the infinite. It taught us that a single thought can topple kingdoms, that a poem can build a nation, that a fairy tale whispered by a fire can outlast empires. It showed us that behind every hard edge of industry and reason lies a soft, flickering flame, the imagination that makes us more than just machines, more than just facts on a page. So when we stand among the trees or sit with a book in our lap or hear a melody swell in a darkened hall, we carry this old story with us. We carry the echoes of thinkers who walked forest paths and asked impossible questions. We carry their restless wonder and their fragile warnings. And maybe, just maybe, we carry their hope that we, too, might stand firm in the middle of contradictions. Rooted like the oldest tree, yet always reaching, always dreaming, always becoming something more.